And welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about likes and dislikes about living in the UK. There are 100 different reasons why you might like living here, and probably 100 why you would not like living here. We don't have that much time. So what I've done is picked out 5 things that I really like about living here, and 5 things that I kind of dislike about being here. Some of these are significant, some of them not so much. But you'd be surprised when you move to another country or you're in another country, you notice the big things and you notice some small things that you didn't expect to see at all. And there's some of those on this list for pluses and minuses about living in the UK. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that as an American, to move to the UK, it's relatively easy. You have the same language-ish. You have similar cultures. There's always been this talk about a special relationship between the UK and the US, and I think part of that comes from, well, mainly it comes from that the US used to be a colony of the UK, but it comes from a similarity in culture, similarity in language, similarity in many things that connect us much easier. So moving here is not as difficult as moving to a country, for example, when I moved to Denmark. One of the nice things about living here is I can talk to anybody, I can read everything. When you go up to a stranger and start speaking to them in English, you don't feel bad because you're not speaking their native language. You're actually speaking their native language. So that makes it much easier. Culturally, linguistically, everything about it is a lot easier when you're here. It's kind of like Europe light. The second thing I want to talk about is the fact that it's close to continental Europe. Brits don't like to admit it, but geographically the UK is part of Europe. I'm not talking about being in the EU, I'm not talking about any of that stuff. It's the fact that distance-wise, you're very close to other things. So for example, if you want to go to Madrid or Paris or Rome, Berlin, Amsterdam, all of these are within 2 or 3 hours. And airfare within Europe is quite cheap. I mean, once the whole pandemic is over and everything opens back up, it'll get back to normal. But before then, when I lived here, you'd be amazed at how cheap it was. It's easy to fly, for example, round trip, London to Amsterdam, $80, easy. The only suggestion I would make is if you go to these places, go to other places, and I suggest you do, because you have this amazing advantage of being so close to so many different cultures that it'd be crazy for you not to enjoy it. When you go, I would suggest you take a significant airline. There's 2 airlines here, Ryanair and EasyJet. Both of them are crap, basically. If you want to be a sardine and fly somewhere, take those. They're even cheaper. I mean, seriously, you can get round-trip tickets to Amsterdam on EasyJet or Ryanair for probably $40. It's crazy cheap. But, you know, I'd rather be treated like a human being and not a fish, so I tend to take, British Air or Lufthansa or SAS or, an airline that knows how to deal with people. The third thing I want to talk about is the amount of parks, green spaces, hiking trails. They're everywhere. Huge parks, little parks, long hiking trails. If you're into outdoors things, if you're into hiking, if you're into wandering around a park, I live in London, so around here it's incredible how many big, gorgeous parks there are. You should definitely take advantage of that. There's actually a ring, I think it's called the Capitol Ring, which is a very, very long hiking trail around London. You can't do it in one day. Well, a normal person can't do it in one day. So it'd be multiple trips. And there's lots of hiking tours and walking tours and enjoying the architecture, the parks. It's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful country. And that's one of the things I really enjoy. Now, are there nice, beautiful parks in other countries? Can you go to other things and enjoy it? Yes, of course there are. But it is one of the things that you should take advantage of if you live here or visit here. Number 2 on the list is the history of the UK. This is an old country. I mean, really old. You know, you want Victorian things, you want medieval things, you want Roman things. It's here. The Romans were here. As an American, that type of history is difficult to find. You can't find it in the U.S. So to find developed cultures 2,000 years ago with full cities and fortifications and all these kinds of things is very enjoyable. You just get lost in the just how old this place is. There's actually a tube station not too far from my apartment, and I walked to it all the time and back and forth and didn't think anything of it. But I walked past a wall that's just there. And at one point I stopped and looked at it, and when you travel around Europe enough, you start to learn how old things are just by looking at a wall. You can tell just how it's cut, what it's made out of, what it looks like. You start getting a sense as to how old these things are. This one looked particularly old. And the reason it looked particularly old was because it was Roman. It was actually the wall as part of the fortification of London, built by the Romans, right across the river. You don't run into that in New York or Chicago or LA. There's nothing that old. So enjoy the history. Speaking of history, the number of museums here is amazing. Very large museums. Almost all of them are free, which is sweet. And I would particularly say you should visit the British Museum. Again, it's free. It's a very large building, gorgeous building, pretty much dedicated to 300 years of British thievery from around the world. So there are things from all over the world that the British in the who knows when, 1800s, saw something, they liked it, they brought it back and put it in their museum, which is actually kind of bad. But it has to be somewhere, and since you're here and it's here, you might as well go look at it. I could spend days in the British Museum, and that's just one. There's other museums that are specialized in time frames or issues, and you really have to look at some of the museums here. The number one reason that I have down for enjoying living in the UK is the NHS, the National Health Service. I've used the NHS a couple times. I have access to it. And if you can come here and have access to the NHS, be thankful. You are dealing with world-class doctors, nurses, hospitals, facilities, equipment, fantastic people, and you're not dealing with insurance companies. You're not dealing with paperwork very much. You register into the system. You go to a GP, and it opens the door to the entire system. It's really effective. Now, you'll listen to Brits complain about it, but complaining is a British pastime, apparently. And you've probably heard stories about how the wait times and all these kinds of things about the NHS. It's generally not true. If you need medical service, you get medical service. If it's something that can wait, you may wait a little bit. But the reality is, if it's something that you need now or you need within the next week, you get it. And there's no discussion about getting approvals from anybody. There's none of that. You just get the service you need. It's between you and your doctor, and it's a beautiful, beautiful system. Does it have its faults? Of course it does. You can't deliver that much service to so many people without there being issues with it. That's true everywhere around the world. But I have to say the NHS is something that I fully appreciate and enjoy about living here. And now we move on to the cons. This is a bit of a mixed list of things that are annoying or just wrong. But that's the way they are. And number one on my list is having the washing machine in the kitchen. It may not sound like a lot, but I have to wonder who was thinking when they decided to put washing machines in the kitchen. Hey, I have this big load of dirty, yucky clothes. Where should I take it to wash them? I know. I'll take them into the room where I prepare my food. That makes sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. But that's where they are. In almost every British house, the washing machine is in the kitchen. Most people have washer-dryer combinations, and they are slow. So for example, you put a load of clothes in, it's going to be washed, it's going to be dried, and by the time it's done, it'll be 3.5 hours. So expect to do laundry over the entire day if you want to get, 4 loads done. Or break it up over days, however you want to do it. But having it in the kitchen is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. Number 2, again, may seem like a small thing, and I almost didn't put it on the list because it's rather minor, but there's a story to go with it. Apparently, nobody uses screens in Windows here. I don't know why. It's not advanced technology of any kind. There's nothing, it's not hard. But people don't use screens. Now normally, if it is a nice day and you have the window open, you'll get flies in and out. Okay, that's annoying, but not enough to, destroy your life living in the UK. But one day, it was a nice evening. I had the window open, went to bed. About 5:30 in the morning, my wife wakes me up and says, "There's something in the living room." I listened, and there was definitely a commotion in the living room. So I got up, went out into the living room, and standing right in the middle of this room was a goose. A goose, flapping his wings, flying up, banging off the ceiling. Scared, I'm sure he was way more scared of me than I was of him, but he came in through the window. You know what stopped him from coming through the window? A screen. It's not that hard. Just put a screen in the window. Drives me crazy. Eventually we got a couple towels and herded him back up towards the window, and when he got on the windowsill, I pushed him out and he flew away and he was fine. But why are there no screens? It makes no sense. Speaking of apartments and houses, one of the things you'll notice is that the houses and apartments, the rooms in the UK are smaller than what you're used to. In fact, in the UK, they have some of the smallest living space in all of Europe. You can find large apartments if you're willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money. But on average, their houses are smaller, their rooms are smaller, their roads are smaller, their cars are smaller, everything's smaller. Almost everything. And you need to get used to that. If someone tells you that, if a Brit tells you that they have a big bedroom, they probably don't. It could be, 12 by 12 would be considered a big bedroom. And that's just not. So you're going to have to scale down, if you live here, what you're going to get in terms of space. You can pay for more space. It's available. But on average, most houses are going to be smaller. Most rooms are going to be smaller. So keep that in mind. One of the things I noticed as an American is there's a bit of an attitude here among some Brits towards Americans, towards anybody actually, not just Americans. Most people I've met have been fantastic. They're fun to talk to, have a beer with them, talk to them, enjoy the differences between our cultures while easily communicating the similarities that we have. It is one of the fun things that you can do is to talk to someone who's not from your country. But you will run into people who carry an enormous amount of British arrogance inside of them. Some of the things they make fun of Americans about are the exact same things that continental Europeans say about the British, which is bad food, uncultured, overweight, drive on the wrong side of the road, rude travelers. All of these things that people say about Americans are what other Europeans say about the British. And I just find that funny. So you can do a couple things. You can either, which is what I generally do, just let it roll off and go, yeah, okay, fine, Lord, whoever, talk to you later. Or you can engage them. You can have the argument. You can have the discussion. You're not changing their mind. They're not changing your mind. But, if you want to have that, go for it. But generally, I just avoid those people. But you definitely will run into them. The last thing I want to talk about is the lack of seasons. I grew up in the Midwest, so I was used to 4 seasons. And what you have here are 2 seasons. You have warmish and you have coldish. I mean, it doesn't really snow in London very much. I've been here almost 2 years. I think maybe I've seen a couple flakes and that's about it. It doesn't get super hot very often. So it just kind of operates in this middle ground all year. So you'll have to get used to the weather and seasonal difference. I won't say that the weather is terrible. The lack of seasons is a bit sad, but the weather is actually not that bad. I've lived in worse places in the winter, worse places in the summer. I can tell you that I will take a week in London in the winter over a week in Copenhagen in the winter. Copenhagen is probably one of the worst places I ever lived in terms of weather in the winter. But here at least you get some sun. It rains, it comes, it goes. It does rain and stop raining very quickly. That's strange. But that's something you can get used to. The summers here are nice. They tend to be in the 60s, 70s. Occasionally you'll jump up into the 80s. If it gets up into the 80s, get ready for Brits to complain like they've just moved to the equator or something, but I'm totally fine with low 80s. So there you go. There's 5 likes and dislikes. I'm sure that you have others. If you live in the UK or have been here before and want to comment, please do. I would also ask that you subscribe. The subscribe button is on one of these sides. I think it's this one. You see it, I don't. Subscribe, it's free. Comment on topics, comment on this video, share with your friends. Do what you can to promote this out to other people if you enjoy it. Like it if you do, or dislike it if you don't. It's up to you. So I will see you next time on Chat with Chuck. Enjoy yourself. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.